I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume, so I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. So now we continue again in our reading of the Gospels. Christ has been preaching throughout Galilee. We're in his first Galilean ministry. He did go to Jerusalem briefly for the Passover, but came back to Galilee because the Jews in Jerusalem were seeking his life. He's now been preaching around. He's been healing. We had the story of the healing of Peter's mother-in-law, the casting out of the first unclean spirit. Our last reading was the cleansing of a leper, who then went and told everybody about it when he was told not to. That's where we left it. We are now going to read only in Matthew this time. In this video, we have a Joseph Smith translation. Now, what the Joseph Smith translation is, this is a translation or correction done by Joseph Smith to restore those passages that have been lost or corrupted over the years. We're going to read Matthew chapter 9, verses 1 through 8. And he entered into a ship, and passed over, and came into his own city. And behold, they brought to him a man sick of the palsy, lying on a bed. And Jesus, seeing their faith, said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, be of good cheer, thy sins be forgiven thee. And behold, certain of the scribes said within themselves, This man blasphemeth. And Jesus, knowing their thoughts, said, Wherefore think ye evil in your hearts? For whether is easier to say, Thy sins be forgiven thee, or to say, Arise and walk? But that ye may know that the Son of Man hath power on earth to forgive sins, then saith he to the sick of the palsy, Arise, take up thy bed, and go unto thine house. And he arose and departed to his house. But when the multitude saw it, they marveled, and glorified God, which had given such power unto men. We're given very little detail about how Christ is traveling around, but I get the impression that for most of it, he's walking. He goes from Capernaum to this city, but in this case, he's been in one city, and now he gets in the ship, and he crosses the Sea of Galilee back to Nazareth, which is what it says, his town, unto his own city. That's what he's talking about. They're back in Nazareth now. These are the people that rejected him once before. And while he's there, because he's doing all this preaching, his fame's going around, they're not actively trying to kill him like they did the first time. And they bring in this somebody, as they say, who's suffering from the palsy. This is paralysis. He's somebody who is paralyzed. He's laying in the bed because he can't move himself. And what does Christ do? He forgives his sins first. Your sins be forgiven because of their faith. Remember, even the forgiveness of sins comes through faith. Now the scribes get all mad at this. And it doesn't say exactly, but we know that they were thinking, only God can forgive sins. Now remember, the scribes, these are the doctors of the law. These are the ones that study the scriptures. Like in the Old Testament, Ezra was a scribe. He was a master of the law. That's what these guys are. Now, Christ perceives their thoughts, and he gives them the sign, It's easier to forgive sins than it is to heal the paralysis. But so that you know that I have authority, what I am saying, I have the authority to say, he heals the paralyzed man. And this is something that, again, the people are astounded at. Not just that, it's not even the healing in this case. It is the forgiveness of sins. The people see what is being done, and they can feel not only his power, but his authority. And they know that he's speaking the truth, and it is astonishing to them. But now let us look at the Joseph Smith translation for this portion. A lot of grammatical updates again. In verse 1, where it says, And he entered into a ship, Joseph Smith clarifies, and Jesus entered into a ship. In verse 2, it states, And Jesus, seeing their faith, said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, be of good cheer, thy sins be forgiven thee. Joseph Smith corrects this. And Jesus, knowing their faith, said unto the sick of palsy, Son, be of good cheer, thy sins be forgiven thee, go thy way, and sin no more. Now remember that he's not forgiving future sins. He's forgiving all past sins and saying, Go and sin no more, and retain that forgiveness. In verse 4, it said, Wherefore think ye evil in your hearts? And Joseph Smith has, Wherefore is it that ye think evil in your hearts? I'm not even sure which one is a better or a more clear statement, but it's interesting. In verse 5, King James has, For whether is easier to say, Thy sins be forgiven thee, or to say, Arise and walk? Joseph Smith has it, For is it not easier to say, Thy sins be forgiven thee, than say, Arise and walk? Verse 6, we have this in the King James, but that ye may know that the Son of Man hath power on earth to forgive sins. Then saith he to the sick of the palsy, Arise, take up thy bed, and go unto thine house. Joseph Smith renders this, But I said this, that ye may know that the Son of Man hath power on earth to forgive sins. Then Jesus said unto the sick of the palsy, Arise, take up thy bed, and go unto thy house. So Christ forgave the sins, purposely to teach this, that he has this authority. He wanted them to know that he had this authority. And verse 7 says, And he arose, and Joseph Smith says, and he immediately arose, so no time delay there. And verse 8 has some minor grammatical changes. Multitudes is singular now, multitude, and which is changed to who. So minor grammatical changes. The two important ones there are that he says, Go thy way and sin no more. And then the fact that Christ is not just forgiving sins, he is forgiving sins to teach the people that he has authority. Remember, when Christ first came to Nazareth, or not first, but the last time Christ was in Nazareth, he quoted Isaiah and said, This is fulfilled in your ears. You now see, I am the promised Messiah. I am the Son of God. They tried to kill him for saying this. He is back in Nazareth, and they bring this paralyzed man to him. And his first thing is to teach them, You tried to kill me last time because you rejected my authority. And I am here to tell you that I have this authority. That is very interesting. I leave that here. We will read the same story again in Mark next, and then in Luke. So we will see you there.